Hello and welcome back. My chair sucks. It always sinks on me. Hello and welcome back to the Novice Lumberjack, where I hope you're prepared for a whole lot of BS because it's going to take a lot of words to explain this. So, we're excited about Technical Tuesdays. Let's get technical. Here we go. Here's the little trainer right here that I made a while back. Cut it in half and it nice and pretty. All right, so, and then this is a cylinder that we're going to be using for practicing my porting and polishing and trying to make my first actual truly ported cylinder for practice with building the race saw. So, this will be brought in at the end of the video. But for now, let's see, I'm going to try and get a close-up on this right here so that I can better explain to you guys. Actually, before that happens, tuned mufflers, tuned exhaust pipes, expansion chambers, whatever you want to call it, right? Boxes, right? That's basically all that is a box. Two strokes. You've heard me say it before, or at least I hope you have. That means you're watching my videos. They're like a ballet. They're graceful, all right? There's nothing forced. It's all about flow and how you can make something flow as effectively and efficiently as possible. So what we're doing is we're pulling in air and fuel charge into the crankcase. It gets sent up to the top of the piston via the transfer ports, where it is then compressed. Spark ignites it and explodes, driving the piston back down. The exhaust gases then go out the muffler. All right, so there's your basic flow. Now, if you don't know already, then you've probably never been on a two-stroke dirt bike. Two-stroke or two-cycle engines have a very specific point in their RPM range to where they peak and make their peak horsepower numbers. Now, you can get around this and build one to have a broader range of power for sure, but they do have a little sweet spot, and it's whenever everything is just simply flowing right specifically where it's meant to flow. And so whenever you're a kid and you're riding the 80cc dirt bike and you go, and it just wants to fly out from underneath you, nothing really has changed other than that engine hit its peak balance point where it just simply makes its best horsepower. Now, these ranges are usually pretty small and very specific, and they're also usually engineered at this point at least. But way back whenever two-cycle engines were first being built, and definitely, did you know this? Four-cycle engines came out first. I would think that the two-stroke came out first, but no. Four-cycle, much more complex, came out first. But anyways, let's look at, not whenever they first came out, but round about 1960, whenever they started really getting use in a lot of different motorcycles. And in the 70s, they really started getting use. The exhaust pipes on them were just simple pipes. Simple, straight pipes, went into a muffler, and that's it. But somebody started, I don't know who, started messing around and figuring out that if you can control the sonic resonance, thank you, Tim, if you can control the sonic resonance and the sonic pulses that are coming out the exhaust with the explosion, if you can control that, what you can do is you can do two things. You can stop the fresh charge from coming out and into the exhaust. Why do we want to do that? Because if we have fresh charge going into the exhaust, then we are wasting fuel and air. That is why two-cycle engines have been far worse on emissions and pollution. It's because that fuel, that unburnt fuel, just comes right out the exhaust. The point is your mixture a lot of times goes unburnt right out the exhaust. And we're wanting to stop that. So the first bounce back of the sonic pulses, it halts that the fresh charge from going into your muffler, right? At least to a point. It says stop. It's like hallway monitor. Where's your hall pass? But then it goes back and it bounces off the back of the cylinder and goes back out the exhaust. Whenever it does this, it creates a flow that helps to pull more fresh charge into the combustion chamber right before the exhaust closes up and compression begins. So it's a total balance. Now, let me get that camera and I'll show you close up. Okay, so here we are right up close. So you're familiar with this enough. You know what's going on, right? With the when the piston goes up, let me get back here. As the piston goes up, what you are doing is you are decreasing the pressure that is in the crankcase. And the pressure drop here relates to whenever this opens up, airflow goes through your carburetor and into the crankcase. Then we are simultaneously compressing what's up here. It explodes when you hit top dead center. Boom. And it drives the piston back down. The driving of the piston back down is taking this now is full of fresh air and fuel mixture. It's forcing it up that little channel. You can't quite see it in this, but it is a transfer port. It's pushing it up that little tunnel. You're about to see it. And it comes out right there. It floods back in like this. Now, but before that happens, let's go back, rewind. You've got all these exploded gases. And as soon as you get right there, the exhaust is open and it starts to flow out the exhaust. Now, this is what I am concerned with. These mufflers have been on like every chainsaw since the beginning, basically. All they are is a box. Every single one of them is almost identical in size and shape and function. There's different ones. Some of them are more clogged up than others. Some of them flow more freely, blah, blah, blah. But there's been little thought that's given to the mufflers at all because, well, I mean, who knows why, but I can tell you most people, whenever they think of a tuned exhaust for a two-stroke, they're thinking of the large expansion chambers like go on dirt bikes, right? Now you've seen them put on chainsaws, and that's fun. That's fine and dandy. But you're not going to have a great big pipe like that walking around in the woods and cutting down trees. And so that's why this one is by far the more successful model, you know. But what people don't talk about enough is that there is a way to tune this one. Will it ever be as good as an expansion chamber? No, it won't. However, you can get performance out of one of these. And the way you do that is by the distance of this wall right here in relation to the piston, the distance that the exhaust has to travel before it hits a dead stop wall. Now, what we want to do, and this is, I don't think I've mentioned it yet, this video is largely, yeah, sure, it's for my audience, but it's largely for my, my father-in-law and my brother-in-law. My father-in-law is a world-class mathematician, and my brother-in-law is a world-class engineer. He used to work for Bombardier, but then the company got bought out for some France company, or French company. Anyways, point is he's a darn good engineer, and my father-in-law is a darn good mathematician. So I'm wanting their help in figuring out the formula that it's going to take so that I can figure out how far this wall needs to be from this piston. So, what I am aiming to do, the moment that this piston opens up the exhaust port, those exhaust pulses are going to travel like this. Now, there's a lot of things that affect this. Heat mainly, because the flow, dynamic flow, I think that's the right term, it goes towards the actual hot spot. So the hotter this is, the more draw it is going to create. So basically, this thing, if this was cold and this was hot, your gases would not want to flow this way. So you need this to be made out of good sturdy material that can really heat up, get nice and hot, and create that draw. So anyways, here's what's important. We want to go out, hit the wall, bink, bounce back in, bink, hit this wall, and then go back out, all in the time span that it takes for this piston to go from here to here. All right, we need to get that to go bink, 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 all from right here, bink, to right there. So what we've got to figure out is how fast those sonic pulses travel. All right, if we can figure out how fast those sonic pulses travel, which I do believe that most people just simply go by the sound barrier. I think that's like, I don't know, what, like 700 miles an hour, something like that. And they break it all the way down into little teeny tiny chunks so you can work with it. And then you got to figure out the speed in which the piston is traveling. The piston in the saw that we are going to be messing with has a stroke of 32 millimeters. So 32 millimeters, boop, 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 and then another 32 millimeters. So it has to travel a full 64 millimeters for one rotation. And what we're going to aim for is 10,000 rotations per minute. I want this thing, or well, not this one, but I want the saw that I'm going to be building, I want it to reach peak power at 10,000 RPMs. Now that's going to give you a range. It's going to give you a range of, say, 9,500 RPM to 10,500 RPM, something like that. It is going to give you a range. And I'm perfectly fine with that. And the way that we're going to base this calculation, with this thing, we got to figure out the speed at which the piston is traveling. If the full stroke, 32 millimeters down, 32 millimeters to the top. So 64 millimeters, and we're doing that 10,000 rotations per minute. All right, 64 millimeters, 10,000 rotations per minute. And then we got to figure out how far we need to go out before it hits this wall, bounces back, and then bounces out again. So that means we need the measurement from this side to this side, which is going to be 44 millimeters. So if you consider this the start point, how far does it have to go before it can travel all the way back and back across this 44 millimeters and this 44 millimeters to get out the exhaust? So that's the project. So I made this real cute little drawing. All right, we've got a piston comes down. The exhaust gases have to go in, hit the wall, bounce back, hit this wall, bounce back out to the exhaust again. So all of that travel has to happen in the distance from here and then back up to it again. So as the piston goes down, exhaust gases escape, come back, bounce back out, and then it closes up. So that's the time. So we've got to figure out how long, how many milliseconds or whatever does this stay open for. If we're going down and back up 10,000 times per minute, and it's overall 64 millimeters of travel. So now we got to figure out how big that opening is. The cylinder at the beginning of the video. Here we go. We are going to measure the distance of this opening, the exhaust port. That is 10.49 millimeters. I will make it a little bit bigger, so we'll go with 12 millimeters, and it'll be open and closed, so I would say 24 millimeters. So you have, that opening will be open for 25 millimeters of the piston's travel, if that makes any sense. Let me draw it out right here. I would imagine that it makes no difference whatsoever where these 12 millimeters times 2 makes 24 millimeters. It would make no difference if they were up here versus down here. So that shouldn't come into play whatsoever, I don't think. So all we got to do is we got to figure out the speed of the piston. We got to assume that it's going to travel at the speed of sound. All right. Now, like, Elmar, he's my father-in-law, and he was telling me, there's basically all you can do is your best guess. And I get that. Yep. All we can do is best guess this stuff. And because so many different variables will cause a change in this. I totally understand that. But you got to start somewhere, right? So, I mean, if the calculation says that the amount of distance that we need is all the way out here, well, then that's not going to work for me. So, yeah. Anyways, it's going to be a lot of bing, 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 bing before it gets in here, I don't know if that even makes any sense. But yeah, we got to figure out the speed of the piston, and then the time that this will be open. And then once we figure out the time that this is open, then we can figure out, based on the speed of sound, how long it will take to go back and forth like this and figure out where we need this wall to be. And our aim, once again, is going to be 10,000 RPMs. At 10,000 RPMs, that's where we want to make peak power, I think. And that's it for this episode. There's no end result because I don't have the calculations yet. I can't build the exhaust pipe the exact size that I need to based off of those calculations and stuff. So anyways, I will do calculations on my end and try and figure this out myself. It's really just basic math. First, we got to figure out how fast that piston is traveling. And then we've got to look at the opening of the exhaust port. And we've got to figure out from that how long it's going to stay open based on how fast the piston is moving. And at 10,000 RPMs, that's the speed that we're going to have in mind. And based on that, then, we've got to see how far a pulse will travel in that amount of time. If the pulse will travel, say, 24 inches, since we have to go from here to here and then back out, roughly, then we're looking at we need 8 inches because it'll go 8 inches, 8 inches, 8 inches. Now I know I'm in that little scenario there. I'm not taking into consideration the surface of the piston. I'll get that. But how fast it's traveling will lead us to how long the exhaust port will stay open. And then from there, we guesstimate how far a sonic pulse will travel based on the speed of sound. Once we have that number of how far it will travel, then we can start to work towards cutting that in half, in thirds, whatever it needs to be, so that it'll travel in and out. Let's see if it works.